Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video I'm back with another Who Would I Vote For video, this time doing it for Survivor South Africa. Now, I've technically never done one specifically for Survivor South Africa before. I have done one for International Survivor as a whole. However, considering the fact that I just really don't feel like much really changed for the international seasons outside of the new ones that came since then, most of which being South African and Australian seasons, I decided to just do individual videos for those respective series. So here we are going to be talking about Survivor South Africa, where again, the last time I did this, we were only up to season 6. We now have 9 seasons to talk about. So let's jump right into it. From season 1, we had a final 2 of Vanessa versus Jacinda. And I think this one's a pretty simple one for me. Again, I personally would vote for Jacinda. I do feel like Vanessa, while she did make one good move, particularly at the final 5 and getting Jacinda to vote Gareth out, outside of that, her game is really just her following Imzy and really trying to give Imzy the win. And even beyond that, she was voted out of the game and had to come back to the game. And when she came back to the game, she was given a massive benefit of having guaranteed 2 out of 5 people left in the game on their side. So again, like, it's not an ideal game from my point of view. Now, I don't think Jacinda's game is the greatest in the world either. Again, she was largely falling behind Gareth and was willing to go to the end with him and lose to him initially, only for it to eventually flip after Imzy and Vanessa come back to the game. But even then, that was more of a self-preservation move. And again, like, I don't think either of them played particularly great. However, because Jacinda wasn't voted out and came back, I would vote for Jacinda. Next up for season 2, we have Lorat versus Grant. And this one's pretty easy for me. I do feel like I would vote for Grant. Now, I do feel like my opinion on Grant's game over time has gone down, though. I remember I used to think of him as a really dominant runner-up, but in reality, I do feel like he kind of loses control during the post-merge and just gets kind of lucky at the fact that Anella gets sniped out of the game at 4, to where he's taken to the end by Lorat instead of what Anella would have been, though. Again, Lorat's game to me was not that great either. I mean, she was in a decent-ish spot for a lot of the game. She was never truly in danger, but she also had very little agency in the game. And the points that she did, she made pretty rash, emotional moves that were more so just based around who she liked and who she didn't like than it having any strategic thought to it. While again, Grant, I do feel like did pretty much dominate the early portions of the game. And while he does lose a bit of control at the very end, I feel like his game to me just comes off as more impressive. So again, I would vote for Grant. Next up for Santa Carolina, and here we do have Gigi versus Ashley. And again, this is another pretty easy one for me, and I would vote Ashley. Now, I don't think Gigi plays an entirely bad game. I mean, while it is a game that is, again, similarly like Lorat, not very strategically minded and pretty passive, I do think she is good socially, and I do think she did good work in making Ashley want to take her to the end, which was a misguided move by Ashley. However, I do feel like Ashley pretty much just ran the entire show this season. I think she was obviously in a great position early on in her tribe, was one of the main strategic thinkers of her tribe, and then post-merge, while there is some craziness, particularly due to Isaac flipping back and forth, she's able to maintain the ship mid-merge and really just run the show from that point forward. Clearly being the season's most strategic player, and really for me, again, it's not particularly close. I do feel like Ashley is probably one of the best international players we've ever seen, and again, I would vote for Ashley. Next up for SA Maldives, and here we do have Heike versus Let's Go. And this one is a little bit closer in the fact that I do think Heike was more out in front and made bigger moves to get to the end of the game, but was also a bit on a high horse, where his constant talk about honor and loyalty is definitely off-putting. While Let's Go plays a solid game in her own right, she's largely a second in command to Tajin for most of the game, really until the point that Tajin's taken out, and then after that, she's able to reassimilate with Heike and Bonnie, and is in the majority until the very end. Now, I will say, I don't love the fact that she goes to 3 with Heike and Bonnie, who both would have cut her, and also the fact that she takes Heike to the end, someone that obviously ends up beating her over Bonnie, but I think she plays a solid enough game. However, I do think I would still lean towards Heike. I do think Heike had a lot more agency in his game, was someone that enacted his strategic thoughts a lot more, and someone that led the charge in more votes than Let's Go. And while I think Let's Go's positioning was definitely better for more of the game, I just find Heike's gameplay a bit more impressive. Again, I would go for Heike. Next up for SA Champions, we do have Graham versus Boule versus Sivu, and this is a pretty simple one for me as well. I will go for Graham. And again, I think Graham is another one of the better players in international Survivor history. I do think he is essentially a boring version of Tony, but through that plays a really dominant, dynamic game. He constantly shifts alliances and is always in the know of what's going on. I mean, the tail end of his game is a bit rocky, though, to be fair, his final 5 round is due to him being on the outs due to an idol, though his final 4 round definitely is particularly rocky, but he wins despite that. But again, I think he has a strong game, one that has him pulling together numbers to blindside half the tribe at the first vote, though really gets no blowback from that. Obviously flip-flops throughout the post-merge. Again, a really impressive game. And in comparison, like Boule, again, I don't think it's anywhere close. I would never really vote for Boule. I don't think she had any clue what was really going on in the game. While Sivu had a great underdog run, and I definitely would have voted for him over Boule, but I do think in comparison to Graham, he just had a lot less agency in the game. So because of that, again, I would vote for Graham. Next up for SA Philippines, and here we do have Tom versus Jean. And this one is a bit tough in the fact that both of them are not that good. I mean, Tom is someone that was really hated by a lot of his cast for the first half of the season. While he kind of repairs them in the back half of the season, no one really took him seriously. While Jean is a player that was just kind of aloof during multiple points in the game. I mean, she was on the outs early on in the game. She was on the outs towards the end of the game. But a bigger benefit for her was the fact that she was more ingrained in the majority throughout the middle portion of the game. However, I do feel like my vote would go to Tom, simply because I do think Tom's endgame stretch is a bit more impressive. He was able to become Werner's right-hand man, and through that be involved in a lot of his plans, while also ending up backstabbing Werner in the position where he needed to. Also early on in the game, while it is very messy, he still was able to have half the tribe go out of their way to try to save him there, and even have that group even go to rocks in the second tribal. And again, I think that's impressive enough stuff to where I would go for Tom over Jean. Next up for Survivor Island of Secrets, we have Rob versus Nicole versus Darao, and obviously we can instantly eliminate Darao. I would never vote for Darao. He was kind of aloof throughout a lot of the game. However, I do think Rob versus Nicole was actually kind of close. Now, many people look at this as Rob dominated the game. He should be the clear winner. However, again, I think there is a serious argument for Nicole. Now, I think my biggest issue with Nicole is the fact that she knew how big of a threat Rob was and still took him to the end. I think that is my biggest criticism here. But I think when you look at the games themselves, I think there definitely is the argument that Nicole's game is more impressive, that she was able to build more social bonds and really float from group to group. And while that obviously caused people to be upset at her when she betrayed them, and she didn't really manage the jury particularly well, I still feel like the fact that she was able to be looked at as an ally for a lot of people is pretty impressive. And I do think if she had gotten to the end against anybody but Rob, I definitely would vote for Nicole, but I do think I would still lean towards voting Rob. Again, Rob was out in front, dominating the game throughout the entire post-merge, and at the only point of adversity he ever faces, he's able to have Nicole leak the information about it to him. Now, I still think Nicole was on board of getting rid of him at a point, and that definitely is like a fault to have with Rob's game, is the fact that he was very much under the mercy of Nicole, and I don't know how much of it was really Rob convincing Nicole to keep him. I think it was Nicole making that decision on her own, but still, I think Rob's game is extremely impressive. The way he utilizes the Island of Secrets to his benefit and gather information from others is really impressive, and just in general, really dominant game throughout most of the season. I would vote for Rob. Next up for Immunity Island, we do have Nicole versus Anella, and I mean, this is just kind of a bad final too. I mean, I think Nicole is someone that I've said in the past, I think kind of lucked her way to a win. I mean, many people did not really respect Nicole until the point where she votes out Chappies, which was a move that everyone was going to do at 3, but for some reason the jury decides to give her so much credit for it, while Anella was someone that was more respected coming into the end game and was definitely more involved in how the game played out, but also was extremely flawed in that he does make some dumb mistakes at points. He also does come off pretty bad to the jury at points, but despite that, again, like coming into the final 3 round, he was looked at more favorably than Nicole, but then proceeds to lose simply because of Chappies getting voted out by Nicole, I guess. It's still a jury decision that boggles my mind, but again, like, I don't think either of them played particularly well. I personally would vote for Anella simply because Anella was more involved in the goings on leading up to the end. Again, he had this relationship with Tyson and Kieran, he had a relationship with Chappies, had a relationship obviously with Nicole, like he had more going on in the game to me than Nicole. So again, because of that, I would vote for Anella. And finally, we have the last season of Survivor South Africa. Here we do have Return of the Outcasts, where we have Dino versus Shane, and this is another one where like I don't think either of them are particularly bad. However, I do think here I would lean towards Dino. Now again, I could see an argument for Shane, the fact that Shane was probably more of a stable presence throughout more of the game. But the problem is that he was a stable presence that knew he wasn't likely to win at the end and had a very clear path to a win by taking Killarney and simply just didn't take that, which is pretty frustrating. And in comparison to Dino, again, I think Dino's game is very rocky. I mean, there's a lot of points where he does have to flip against his allegiances. I do feel like he has some misreads at points. However, I still think his game overall is pretty solid. It's still a game that has him being in the majority for most of it, and even in moments where he's not, he does have pretty integral relationships that help him stay around. And again, in this instance, I do think it is a close-ish vote, but I think I would lean towards Dino. But there we go. I mean, that is my who would I vote for Survivor South Africa. Now, moving forward, I will do the same thing for Australian Survivor. And again, just in general, I'll continue to redo a lot of my other bigger videos for my first year of the channel as part of the 5-year anniversary of the channel. So stay tuned for all those things. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.